Garden Basics with Farmer Fred is brought to you by Smart Pots, the original lightweight, long-lasting fabric plant container. It's made in the USA. Visit smartpots.com/Fred for more information and a special discount. That's smartpots.com/Fred. Welcome to the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast. If you're just a beginning gardener or you want good gardening information, well, you've come to the right spot. Can Bermudagrass be controlled, or is it forever? America's favorite retired college horticultural professor Debbie Flower has some tips for converting a Bermudagrass turf area into another lawn type, or even to control it to the point that you can use that area to expand your garden. Organic advocate Steve Zien tells us how plants communicate to get the nutrients they need and to ward off invading pests. Plus, he talks about using compost tea for increasing the good guys in your soil biology. And we get a quick tip about a very necessary but psychologically difficult garden task, removing excess fruit from your deciduous fruit trees this time of year. We're podcasting from Barking Dog Studios here in the beautiful Abutilon Jungle in Suburban Purgatory. It's the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast, brought to you today by Smart Pots. And we'll do it all in under 30 minutes. Let's go. We like to answer your garden questions here on the Garden Basics podcast. A lot of different ways you can get your question in. We'll have that list later on in the show. And Fran in Lodi, California, emails us at fred@farmerfred.com. And she says, I read your article regarding tips to keep the grass alive in the Lodi News Sentinel and found it informative. Well, thank you. She says, I have several questions and would appreciate your advice. I live in Lodi, and over time, Bermudagrass has taken over approximately 70% of my lawn. I'm interested in overseeding it with fescue grass seed. I have questions about that, though. Is this the proper grass seed to use? Can I overseed in April, or is there a better time? Should I mix the fertilizer with the seed? And if so, what type? Thank you for your help. Yes, Bermudagrass. I think it's one of Farmer Fred's garden rules, like number 1 or number 2, is Bermudagrass is forever. Debbie Flower is here, our favorite retired college horticultural professor. Have you ever battled Bermudagrass? Silly question.
I'm battling it here. I don't think it's a cross-country problem, but we are in Central California, as is Lodi. Lodi's a little south of us, and we're in the hot. Bermudagrass is a grass that's very tolerant of hot, dry conditions. And as you have said, Bermudagrass is forever. One of the reasons is that it has a very deep root system. It can go down 2 feet deep, depending on soil and water conditions. And it also has underground stems from which it can grow. It can travel long distances, and of course it flowers as well. There are improved types of Bermudagrass that are sold as sod and are more desirable for the lawn, and that's because they don't flower as quickly. So you don't have to deal with those flower heads all the time.
It's not a pretty flower either. It looks like an upside-down turkey leg.
Yes, right. I have yet to meet someone who wants a Bermudagrass lawn, even one of the improved types. So, yes, it's a problem, and it's something you have to stay on top of. It will be difficult to overseed because it will luxuriate in the conditions that the fescue will grow. And so she can put the fescue lawn in, but she will have the Bermudagrass forever.
The thing is, though, Bermuda needs the sun. And if you put in a fescue lawn, you could adjust your mower blade so it is at the highest setting. So there would be a lot of shade on that Bermudagrass. Bermudagrass is typically mowed very low, maybe a 1/2 inch to 1 inch. Fescue is best mowed at 2.5 to 3.5 inches. So if you've got that shade of the Bermudagrass by growing the fescue grass tall, you have a better chance of limiting its progress.
Yes, the lawn I have out front that my husband requested is a no-mow lawn, and it is all fescue. We started it from seed. We had to battle the weeds for the first couple of years. Now we do get some Bermuda, but it is mostly at the edge along the driveway.
As far as fertilizing that brand new lawn, there is starter fertilizer out there, and usually the process when it comes to overseeding a lawn is to dethatch, aerate, overseed, put down the fertilizer, and then put down a thin layer of mulch on top. And don't forget to roll the area, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, rolling is, you can rent a roller. They're pretty big, but they're not very heavy because when you get them home, you put water in them to make them heavy. And the point is to push down just enough on the seed so that it makes contact with the soil and the mulch.
And then you have to keep that area moist for about 2 weeks or so until the seeds germinate and pop up. And generally speaking, you don't go back to a regular watering regimen with that fescue lawn, that new fescue lawn, until after its first mowing. And that could be, 4 weeks?
Right. Fescue is relatively slow to germinate in the grass world. It can take 2 weeks or more. So be patient. Don't think you've lost it by not having germination. And then, yes, it has to get well established and have a good root system before you mow it. So you need to get a good 4 inches tall before you mow it.
One trick, if you want to go this route, Fran, is to solarize your soil before you put in that fescue lawn. That fescue grass is actually best planted in September, October. April is like the second best time of the year, but at least if you're doing it in September and October and you have the Bermudagrass already there, it is starting to go into dormancy at that time. So you have a better chance of controlling it. In the meantime, in the summertime, what you can do is during the hottest time of the year, maybe for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, even 8 weeks, mow that Bermuda real short, water the area thoroughly, and then cover it with clear plastic, but seal it well around the edges. And that can raise the temperature of that soil up to 120, 140 degrees. And that really helps control the Bermudagrass. Now, Debbie, you've done soil solarization. I have too. And you can have a lot of success with it.
Yes, I did it in an area where at a different house where I had another pernicious weed, which was nutsedge. Both of these weeds have underground storage organs, and ultimately those aren't totally killed by the solarization process. The plant declines enough that you can get ahead of it.
Exactly. Now, it would be better if you decided not to put in the fescue, but instead wanted to put in plants instead of turf, because that way you could have several inches of mulch, which would even thwart that Bermudagrass even more.
Yes, that's true. But to answer Fran's question, yes, she can overseed with fescue. She will be fighting the Bermuda unless she solarizes it first. Or there is one chemical I'm aware of that will knock the Bermuda back, but it will not kill it. You check at your local nursery. If she does use the fescue, seed very heavily. It is a bunch grass. So where one seed germinates, you will get a bunch of grass. And the next seed over that germinates, you get another bunch of grass. And so if you want a thick lawn, you need lots of bunches of grass. It will not travel along the surface of the soil and put up blades of grass all along that, like something like a Kentucky blue would do.
Well, that's another option too, Fran, that instead of going from seed with the fescue is roll it out as sod after you've solarized the area and really knocked back that Bermudagrass. And that would make it even harder for the Bermudagrass to jump back up.
Yes, that's a good point.
But yeah, it's an ongoing battle, Fran. Bermudagrass, it's forever, but you can slow it down. And when you see it pop up, pull it out.
Yeah, and that'll be a lifelong hobby.
Yeah, consider it a hobby. Yes. Thank you, Debbie.
You're welcome, Fred.
I'm pretty picky about who I allow to advertise on this podcast. My criteria, though, is pretty simple. It has to be a product I like, a product I use, and a product I would buy again. And you know who checks all those boxes? It's Smart Pots. Smart Pots is the oldest and still the best of all the fabric plant containers that you might find. Smart Pots are sold around the world, and they're proudly made 100% right here in the USA. Smart Pots come in a wide array of sizes and colors and can be reused year after year. Some models even have handles, and that makes them a lot easier to move around the yard. Because the fabric breathes, Smart Pots are better suited than plastic pots, especially for hot climates. That breathable fabric has other benefits too. Water drainage issues? Not with Smart Pots. Roots that go round and round choking the root ball like they do in plastic pots? Doesn't happen with Smart Pots. These benefits will help you get a bigger, better plant than what you've gotten in the past with the same size plastic or other hard container. Smart Pots are available at independent garden centers as well as select Ace and True Value hardware stores nationwide. To find a store near you or to buy online, visit smartpots.com/Fred. And don't forget that /Fred part. On that page are details about how, for a limited time, you can get 10% off your Smart Pot order by using the coupon code FRED. F-R-E-D. Use it at checkout from the Smart Pot store. Visit smartpots.com/Fred for more information about the complete line of Smart Pot's lightweight, colorful, award-winning fabric containers. And don't forget that special Farmer Fred 10% discount. Smart Pots, the original award-winning fabric planter. Go to smartpots.com/Fred. If you saw the movie Avatar way back when, you know that plants, in the case of Avatar, trees, can communicate with each other. And actually, science has proven that to be true. Steve Zien is here, the organic advocate for Sacramento and beyond, owner of Living Resources Company. It's more than communication that's going on below the ground, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, plants have evolved over time on this planet to work in a mutually beneficial or symbiotic relationship with the soil biology. They actually communicate with the soil biology. Now, they don't use cell phones. They don't text. They produce what are called root exudates. It's, like perspiration coming out of the roots. And the plants use up to 40% of their energy to produce these root exudates. They use these root exudates to communicate with the soil biology. For example, if that plant needs phosphorus and it's not getting enough phosphorus, it will exude particular chemicals out of that plant root that will signal particular kinds of soil biology that are really good at extracting and making phosphorus available to the plant roots. It's like kind of, calling up your local grocery store and saying, I want to come pick up my groceries. Can you have them ready? And so they're communicating with the soil biology to get the nutrients they want. If they have a pest problem, they exude different chemicals, and it will either discourage the pest in some instances, or it will encourage another type of soil biology to fight that off. Now, one of my favorite pictures, and I can't show you the picture, but it's of a nematode trapping fungi. And you can go to YouTube and look up nematode trapping fungi. And these fungal strands, these long strings, are just sitting there in the soil. When the plant root exudes a particular chemical because it's being attacked by the nematode and it wants these fungi to help control them, this chemical that gets exuded out of the plant root tells the nematode, or tells the fungi, the nematodes are there. The fungi get all excited. They start producing these really small rings. Those rings then exude a chemical that attracts the nematode. The nematode goes inside the ring, swims inside the ring, and nematodes are like microscopic worms. And kind of like a Venus flytrap, when a fly goes in a Venus flytrap, the trap closes up. With the nematode trapping fungi, those rings, when they get touched on the inside, swell up with fluid, and they trap the nematode. And then the fungi starts exuding chemicals that will enable the digestion of that nematode. They will eat the nematode because it's decomposing from those chemicals that the fungi gets rid of. So without this exchange of exudates, none of this would happen. We really wouldn't have life on this planet. It's really a critical symbiotic relationship. And like I said, 40% of the energy that the plants use goes to producing these exudates. And if you don't have that soil biology down there, they're missing on that benefit.
So how do you increase the soil biology to encourage this sort of activity?
You don't till, because you're killing the soil biology. You don't use synthetic fertilizers. You use organic fertilizers. You put down compost. You put down earthworm castings. You put down wood chips. And you just put those materials on the soil surface. You do not disturb the soil at all. That will go a long ways to creating this mutually beneficial relationship.
I think we should point out, too, that just like real life, this is real life, and it takes a long time to see results. You have to have a lot of patience and perseverance. It's not an overnight fix. It's something that does take years of work to get your soil in that sort of tip-top shape. Although you will see benefits very soon afterwards. For complete benefits, you need to keep it up year after year after year.
Yeah, for the most part, agree. But I will tell you that I had one client who put down 6 inches of worm castings at the beginning of the rainy season. And she had rock hard soil. We couldn't get a pick into it. And after the rainy season was over, after those 6 inches of worm castings disappeared into the soil, she had nice, loose soil. So with that much worm castings, she added huge amounts of soil biology relatively quickly and created nice, loose soil with that variety of pore spaces, that good soil structure that we want within a 6-month period of time. Now, earthworm castings are expensive, and most people aren't going to be able to afford putting down 6 inches of worm castings. What you can do is get some worm castings and make what's called worm tea. And you basically put the worm castings in like a tea bag and put it in a 5-gallon bucket, get an aquarium pump to pump air into that, water containing bucket with the tea in there, and brew that for 24 to 48 hours, and then spray that on your soil and then water it in. There will be huge, huge amounts of soil biology in that tea.
The key, though, is keeping it activated, correct?
By activated, I'm assuming you mean that it has to have the oxygen being pumped into it.
Correct.
If you store it for a day, there's so much soil biology in that water, and if you're not aerating it, the soil biology will use up all the oxygen that's in there very, very quickly, and they will die. So you need to take it from when you're brewing it to put it out in the garden or landscape as quickly as you can.
Beneath my worm bin, I have a circular worm bin with a drain spout, and I keep a container underneath that drain spout. And as the watery material in the worm bin descends, it comes out and collects in the container. What do I do with that stuff?
You can, pour it around on the soil. It's not going to have huge amounts of soil biology, but it'll have wonderful nutrition. The reason why it's not going to have a whole lot of soil biology is because it's a liquid, and the soil biology that may or may not, or that was in there, didn't have enough oxygen, and so the desirable kinds of soil biology won't be there, but the nutrients will. And I've got a worm bin. I don't have mine just collects on the bottom, and once a week I go out and I drain it, and I just pour it on some plants that I think would benefit from some great nutrition, and that liquid material when it's poured into the soil is in a form that the plant roots can immediately use, and it'll also feed that soil biology that we've been talking about.
My understanding is there have been no peer-reviewed studies of that process.
Of the compost tea?
Correct.
There have been a number of studies done at universities making compost tea, in particular because organic farmers were using it primarily for disease control. And the problem was that the quality of the compost tea varies tremendously with the quality of the compost. And they were not testing the compost to see who was living there. And if you don't have the right biology in that compost, the quality of the compost tea is not going to be there. It's really important when you're brewing compost tea, which is why I like worm castings, because the quality of the worm castings is almost always excellent. But the research done doesn't always necessarily take into consideration the quality of the compost. And so the results that they're getting are questionable.
How is tea made from worm castings any different than what's pouring out from my worm bin?
Stuff that's coming out of your worm bin has not had air pumped into it. And the teas that are brewed, you're pumping air into it all the time. And that soil biology needs that oxygen. And without that oxygen, they're going to die. And so your content of soil biology in the stuff that comes out the bottom of your worm bin is not going to have enough oxygen in it to support a very large biological population of soil microbes.
So this is really a process that should be done in one fell swoop. You can't really store the worm tea. You have to make it and use it right away.
Correct.
I have nothing else to say.
It really works really, really well.
Says Steve Zien.
There are, organic farmers have been using compost tea for decades and have had wonderful success. And I think organic farmers and other people who use this, the compost tea or the worm casting teas, will tell you because the biological makeup of the compost and the worm castings is variable, and we don't have the technology to control that yet. And until that happens, what comes out of that tea is basically unknown. Now, you can take a class. The Soil Food Web has a course that you can take online where you get a microscope and you can identify who is in your compost, who is in your worm castings, what little microscopic organisms. And you can find out whether you've got the appropriate critters that you want before you brew that tea. And so once you find that compost or worm castings that have the critters that you want, then you have really good quality tea. And if we could somehow figure out a way to put a little aerator in the bottle and put that bottle on the shelf with that aerator, then we could get some sort of potentially standardized product. But we're not there yet.
Chances are we'll have links in today's show notes about not only the nematode trapping fungi YouTube video that I'm sure Steve will forward to me, but also links to commercial aerators that you could even purchase for this very purpose.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say I am a bit skeptical. I will let you, the listener, decide for yourself whether compost tea is right for you or not. We'll have links in today's show notes, as well as probably a comment or two from some other sources of information about compost tea in Friday's Beyond the Basics newsletter. Steve Zien, organic advocate for Sacramento and beyond, president of Living Resources Company. Thanks so much for the information.
It's been fun, Fred, as always. Thanks.
The Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast has a lot of information posted at each episode in the show notes. Maybe you'd rather read it than listen to it. That's not a problem. We have a complete transcript posted, and you can find that link in the show notes or on our new homepage, gardenbasics.net. That's where you can find that link as well as all the previous episodes of the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast. There, you can leave a message or link up with our social media pages, including our YouTube video page. And at gardenbasics.net, click on the tab at the top of the page to read the Garden Basics Beyond Basics newsletter. And that usually has a bonus podcast attached to it. Plus, in the show notes, there are links to any products or books mentioned during the show and other helpful links for even more information. Plus, you can just listen to the portions of the show that interest you. It's been divided into easily accessible chapters. Want to leave us a question? Again, check the links at gardenbasics.net. And when you click on any episode at gardenbasics.net, you're going to find a link to SpeakPipe, where you can leave us an audio question without making a phone call. Or go to them directly, speakpipe.com/gardenbasics. You want to call us? We have that number posted at gardenbasics.net. Spoiler alert, it's 916-292-8964, 916-292-8964. Email? Sure, send it along with your pictures to fred@farmerfred.com. Or again, go to gardenbasics.net to get that link. And if you send us a question, be sure to tell us where you're gardening, because, as I am fond of saying, all gardening is local. Find it all at gardenbasics.net. Late April April and early May is a good time for planting many easy-to-grow vegetables from seed. That includes carrots, corn, cucumbers, eggplants, radishes, summer squash, and winter squash. Now, of course, it all depends where you live. If you live in a colder climate, it might be closer to Mother's Day or even the 1st of June that you might be doing this. Well, after everybody gets their seeds in, there's a problem. Because the emerging plants are small, many gardeners don't have the heart to thin them out to their proper spacing. The result? An undersized crop, greater incidence of pests and diseases, or too much of a good thing. For instance, squash, like zucchini. That's a perfect example. Now, if you've planted zucchini before, you know what I'm talking about. But how many of you have actually read the instructions on a seed package on how to plant zucchini? Well, here's the instructions found on a Burpee seed packet. It says, sow 1 to 2 seeds of zucchini about 36 inches apart. Cover with 1 inch of fine soil. Firm lightly and keep evenly moist. Zucchini seedlings emerge in 10 to 14 days. Thin to 1 plant when seedlings have 2 sets of leaves. Well, I'm here to tell you that even hardened backyard farmers like myself tend to ignore those spacing instructions, let alone just keeping 1 zucchini plant. But every year it happens. Overwhelmed gardeners go on midnight runs during August, surreptitiously placing bags of oversized zucchini on neighbors' front porches. The bottom line, basically, is read and follow all planting instructions. They aren't kidding. Thinning also applies to your backyard deciduous fruit trees. If you live in a climate that allows you to grow apples, peaches, nectarines, plums, apricots, plum apricots, sometimes called pluots, and a lot more, well, they need a bit of tough love this month as well, and that's thinning the fruit. Now, it might break your heart to remove most of those future edibles in April or May. However, leaving 6 inches or more of space between each piece of fruit now will result in larger fruit and less stress on your trees this summer. You won't have to worry about broken branches that are going to start sagging and probably breaking as the overcrowded fruit gets heavier and heavier. Moreover, because of the lack of crowded and rubbing fruit, the remaining fruit is going to have better exposure and will ripen more evenly. The good news is there's plenty of food-producing backyard vines, shrubs, and trees that don't require crop thinning. Because of their small size, for example, cherries aren't usually thinned from backyard trees. Other small fruited plants like blueberries, strawberries, blackberries, raspberries, they don't require fruit thinning. However, they may need their older wood or runners removed annually after harvest. If you live in a climate that allows you to grow nut crops like almonds and walnuts, they don't need thinning. And if you live where you can grow citrus trees, oranges, lemons, mandarins, limes, and other fruit-bearing evergreen trees, they don't usually require much fruit thinning either. And one more final tip, if you want to suppress weeds, moderate soil temperature, preserve soil moisture, add several inches of an organic mulch beneath all your fruit trees to conserve precious soil moisture. And what's nice, too, as that mulch breaks down, it feeds the soil. But don't let that mulch touch up against the trunk of the tree. You can spread it throughout the entire understory of the tree, but keep it about 2 to 3 inches away from the trunk to avoid rotting issues. Garden Basics with Farmer Fred comes out every Tuesday and Friday, and it's brought to you by Smart Pots and Dave Wilson Nursery. Garden Basics, it's available wherever podcasts are handed out. For more information about the podcast, visit our website, gardenbasics.net, and that's where you can find out about the free Garden Basics newsletter, Beyond the Basics. And thank you so much for listening.